Hi everyone and welcome. This is a short video about the ruins of Holy Cross. Some may call it a church and others may call it a chapel, but either way it is the oldest church or chapel in Wallsend and is Grade 1 listed. And I will call it a church throughout this video. The photos used will mostly have been taken by me or will be old postcards that I have in my collection. Having spent years believing the church was built in around 1190, it seems this date may well be a little bit out. Articles I have been using for research suggest it is more likely to be 1150, so I will stay with the 1150 date from now on. It is suggested that the monks of Jarrow were responsible for building the church, and it is also suggested that they crossed the Tyne on stepping stones. Of course, the Tyne at the time was a lot wider and not as deep as it is today. It is possible that there had also been some kind of wooden structure in the same place as the church, but I have not been able to confirm this information. The stones used for building the church were taken from the remains of the old Roman wall. There were no steps leading to the church at that time, so any stones would have had to have been carried up what would have been a very steep bank, and it's not something I would have liked to have done, so well done to all of those who built the church. The church itself is 52 feet long and 22.5 feet wide, so it is quite small externally and of course smaller again inside. A plan of the church can be seen on your screen at the moment. Although you probably won't be able to see all the details of the plan, it does show which areas were built at different times. So prior to the porch being added in around the 17th century, it was quite a basic shape. A copy of these plans, I believe, were found inside the church in 1910 while some repairs were being carried out. Although small, the church served a large area. However, it was not used in the same way as churches are today. It was mainly used for private prayer, baptisms and marriages. According to some information I have seen, people were not expected to attend church on a weekly basis, and if someone attended even just twice a year, it was seen as being enough to fulfill their religious duties. Built on a hill above the main area of Wallsend, it was not easy to get to the church for services such as funerals, and from Wallsend there was a paved churchway, which we often refer to as the coffin path, which led to the area where the steps are today. However, in the beginning there would have been no steps and coffins would have had to have been carried up the bank, which must have been a very difficult thing to do. Later, some steps were built from the bottom to the top, though not exactly in the same location as the ones that are there today. These were slightly off to the right hand side as seen when looking up the current steps from the burn. Still steep and no doubt awkward, at least these would have been easier to use, and they are well known today as the coffin steps. Still there but very hard to see as they are mostly overgrown and hidden by earth, bushes and trees. The church served the community of Wallsend for many years. I will not try to tell you about its life for all those years as most of the information available is about bills, but by the time we reached 1760 the minister of the church was known to be Emmanuel Potter. A photo about him you have just seen previously. His last known service was April the 13th, 1789, which was Easter Monday. He died in November of that year and was buried at Cramlington. It seems that it is also around this time that the steps leading to the church were replaced at a cost of £3 and 18 shillings. Following Mr. Potter, Mr. Robert Blackett was the next but not the final minister for the church, as it was during his time that the church was closed due to the lack of funding for adequate repairs. I do believe another minister replaced Mr. Blackett and was possibly also the first minister at St. Peter's, but I don't have a lot of information about this. The church gradually fell into disrepair. Mr. William Clark, who at the time lived in Wallsend Hall, took it upon himself to replace the roof in around 1797. However, around the same year he sold Wallsend Hall and moved out of the area, leaving our poor little church without a roof. Sadly, over the next few years, a lot of damage was done to both the church and the church graveyard. Walls of the church were pulled down and gravestones were taken away or destroyed, although there seems to be no explanation for this happening, and iron railings around the graves were also removed or destroyed. It sounds like it was a very sad time. A rumour of the past suggested that gravestones were taken and used as bread ovens, and although I have always thought this to be a crazy untrue idea, having learnt that gravestones were indeed removed from the graveyard, I now wonder if there was some element of truth in those rumours. The font was believed to have been found in the burn stream and was taken to Carville Hall. It was later given to St Peter's Church and can still be seen there today. By the early 1800s, plans were discussed to build a new church to replace the one at Holy Cross. People up until then had had to use the old schoolhouse on the green for marriages, etc., and this had its own problems as it turned out not to be blessed for marriages, so these were seen to be unlawful, and an act had to be passed quickly to make these marriages legal. By 1809, the new church of St Peter's was in use. In 1909, a fence was erected around the ruins of the church to try and protect what remained of it. I will now add some small bits of extra information about the church from the newspapers dating from 1910 to 1968. An article in 1910 discussed the fence which was built as said in 1909. It went on to state that at the time gravestones which are apparently just lying around were collected together and moved into the fenced-off area. The photo on the screen at the moment does actually show Holy Cross, and it shows a lot of broken headstones lying around. They are quite near to the chapel, but others were outside of the fenced area. It's worth noting at this point that people were not just buried inside the fenced-off area that we can see today, and if you look closely at the surrounding grassland now, you can just about see some indications of the old graves. In 1939, it was suggested that a much larger area should be fenced off to include more of the original graveyard and to show people what the area may have looked like in years gone by. It seems it was a reasonably popular idea, but it never happened, most likely as a result of the outbreak of World War II, which meant that other things became more important than some extra fencing. In 1949, Canon Davis was concerned about vandalism. He thought that the youngsters causing the issues were not doing so out of malice, but from a lack of understanding about what the building was. Having sat down to speak to around 20 of them, he asked them to be guardians of the old church. I don't know how much notice they took, but they may have learnt a little more about the church itself. Of course, this is no different to my childhood when I also played in the ruins, as I am sure many others did as well. And finally, in 1968, Canon Davis again was in the news, this time requesting help for funding to repair and maintain the ruins. At the time, the Ministry of Public Buildings stated that the ruins were too small to be classified as an ancient monument. It's worth noting that the ruins were not listed until October 1983. So therefore, funds were not available for repairs in 1968. With the help of the council and the churches of the area, Canon Davis intended to launch a public appeal for funding, and although there is no further info as to how successful this was, the ruins have survived and are still there for us to see today. So I hope this has told you a little bit more about the ruins of Holy Cross that stand on the top of the burn, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.